All right, welcome to the Expansion Chamber, episode 7. I know it's been a bit since we've done this. We'll try and do it more regularly, but no promises. I'm joined again today by Pete of TFN 15 and Brett of Nightwood Guns. So today we're going to be talking about some of the recent, very tragic and awful mass shootings, both in Louisville, which just happened, and then Nashville, which was just the other week. So what are you guys' thoughts on what's going on right now?
Yeah, nice light drop on the room. Hey, what are you guys' thoughts on on the radicalized
How do you guys feel about these mass killings? Oh man, that sucks, huh?
on this radicalized warfare that and the wind up toys from the current administration being released upon us? How do I feel about that? I probably just told you everything that I felt about that. Now, boys, first and foremost, man, there was a recent article that I saw that said, the training of these officers, they said that the training just kicked in, and they went right to work. So I just want to say, unlike we saw in Uvalde, right? This was just a really solid display of police work and also courage, and just watching them dissect the space was really great. I am a professional LARPer, but I really do work really hard on CQB. I train with guys who really do the work. One of my teammates is a professional in the realm, let's just say, on a very high-speed unit in law enforcement, I can say. And we have really good training. We have kind of almost like guest trainers who come in and work with us on CQB. You can go to my YouTube or my Instagram right now, and you'll see in the shorts and the reels, some of our recent stuff at a training event recently. So watching these guys dissect space so well, as opposed and actually acting upon stuff. Sadly, they stepped over bodies, but that is the training. You're supposed to go directly to the threat to prevent any further death and mayhem from occurring, and these guys went right to it. So props, big props to these guys right there on that.
Yeah.
Foremost.
And not only do you want to obviously eliminate the threat, but if you ever run medical to anyone, it's a time consuming and kind of distracting process. And if you don't have someone to cover you, you're now essentially just someone waiting to get shot. So whether you're a citizen, police, whatever, if you're in that sort of environment, if there's still an ongoing threat and it could be coming your way, unless you're hiding somewhere, you're hunkered down with another individual and they need medical attention, you can give it to them right then. If you're going to confront the threat, go confront the threat, because or else they'll probably kill you.
Yeah. And I mean, besides, the stepping over the bodies, sadly, this brings me no joy to say that, but that is what they're trained to do.
Oh, yeah, that's what you have to do.
Right. And besides that, initially they started dissecting the space very clean, going from room to room and making entry, calling a short room or turning around and clearing out a room and clearing out a space, opening up every door. But then once they heard the shots fired, they moved direct to threat, not knowing exactly where it was coming from. They moved past a lot of doors. Every door in a CQB situation is a threat. So usually it's very time consuming, and you have to be very diligent to clear every single threat, and everything behind you that way, is clear, right? So you're moving from door to door and bounding forward until you eventually get there. But, you just didn't have the time. And now when they heard the threat, when they heard Audrey or Aubrey, whatever her name was, Hale, and I will misgender her and I will say it exactly. I will call her because that's what she was, a woman, a biological woman. She when she was popping those shots off, they went right directly to her. And man, boys, I got to let y'all know something. LPVOs are back on the menu. Throw away all your ACOGs, boys, because homeboy said LPVO first, because he knew that initial officer with the LPVO could take the longer shot at a safer distance, and sure as hell he did. Wrap that corner. and he took the corner with his firing shoulder. He didn't shoot offhand or anything. And as he came around, he put her down, I believe, with 3 to 4 rounds. And then the secondary officer came and rolled up on her with his sidearm, his issued sidearm, and I guess she was doing the death gurgle and squirming. And it was a perfect opportunity to make sure the job was done. So good on you, officer, yelling, don't move, stop moving, get away. And she probably had her weapon really close by. He didn't feel safe. Very nice way to articulate that, sir, on video. And he put an additional 3 to 4 bonus rounds of 9mm therapy into her. So really nice work, clean, and courageous. I have to say, when the cops do a good job, guys, we have to applaud them, because I have children, and if this type of thing happened in our school, I would want to see that kind of work at the very least. I think that was baseline behavior right there, and I just want to applaud them for taking out the trash and putting down an evil, disgusting human being. So thank you, guys.
Well, my best friend who lives in Canada is the supreme SWAT commander of the universe, and he said that they did a textbook job and job well done. No, I mean, if you look at the body cam, it's clear that they literally did everything right to the best of their abilities. There weren't really any mistakes worth calling out. They did exactly what was expected of them and what they were trained to do, unlike, you said, Uvalde, which is the most disgusting thing. That it wasn't just one person that failed, it was 300 people that failed all simultaneously, and that the one guy whose wife was the teacher, they actually prevented him from moving forward and disarmed him. But at the same time, he was kind of wishy-washy because he was handcuffed by the orders that he was given. So he's like, my wife texts me and she's bleeding out and dying, what do I do? And he starts moving, he's kind of wishy-washy, and then they just took him out of the equation completely. Someone who was ready to be a hero. So yeah, good job to the Nashville police officers. I think they get full credit for doing a perfect job.
Yeah.
I think that they were really lucky that it was a bad shooter. Somebody who just really sucked and didn't put a lot of thought into what they were doing. I mean, you could see, and I don't like, the second you are a shooter and you're killing people, your gender becomes asshole to me. Like, I don't care what gender you are, you instantly become asshole. So when you look at this asshole on the security camera footage and the way they're trying to clear hallways and shit like that, this person had no idea what they were doing. And that's how most shooters are. Luckily, it's not us gun people who know how to shoot well and could put intelligent thought into how could we go about doing this in the most efficient way. It's all completely mentally disturbed assholes that suck with guns. And because of that, a lot more people could have died in that time period, because cops, even when they show up fast, man, they show up too late. That's just how it works.
Yep.
And I do think that obviously people are going to say, well, if she wouldn't have had, he or she, they asshole wouldn't have had a semi-automatic rifle, they couldn't have caused as much damage as they did in the amount of time that they had. And that's just like the most untrue thing ever. They're going for that low-hanging fruit to get their foot in the door of banning a certain type of gun, because the deadliest school shooting in U.S. history, Virginia Tech, was done with handguns. At the end of the day, we, like us gun people, know that a bullet pokes a hole. And when you're shooting a bunch of people that are unarmed, it doesn't matter what caliber you're using. You could go in there with a 10-22 and just headshot a bunch of children, because there's absolutely, nobody's fighting back. It's fish in a barrel, and nobody's there to stop it. So the type of firearm does not matter. We restrict magazine capacity. They go in there with, 20 10-round magazines. It's not hard to shoot fish in a barrel. And that is the problem, is that we are treating the things that are most precious to us like they are just fish in a barrel, instead of actually protecting them like we could.
Well, and the big thing as well is, like you were saying, luckily no one trained has gone in, and I'm going to address that in a second. But also, you have the fact of, as awful as this sounds, I would much rather the mass shooter be using an individual weapon platform or system like a gun or a knife than a bomb, an airplane, right? The deadliest attacks in U.S. history have not been with firearms. They've been with vehicles, bombs, and planes, I guess other vehicles, right? 9/11, they wouldn't have taken down an entire building with an AR-15, as much as Joe Biden likes to say so. That wouldn't have happened, right? I would have much rather they went in with a rifle into a giant skyscraper and tried to kill everyone. Probably wouldn't have succeeded. NYPD probably would have showed up and taken him out, right? Even SWAT team probably could have assembled by then. But they chose a plane, right? Are we going to ban planes? No. right? No one said that. We said let's increase
But we
your security.
heavily restricted what it takes to get on a plane, which that's what we need to do with firearms, right? We need stronger restrictions.
I think we should look at the other way around. Now, while TSA is not the most effective thing in the world, there is evidence they have thwarted some things from happening. So I think the issue is, okay, we have an environment in which you have a lot of a vulnerable population. Why don't we have security for the vulnerable population, right? Yep. That's ultimately the solution.
I mean, that is 100. I kind of like every time one of these things happens, I just get so furious because my kids are sitting ducks. And yes, we have a single point of entry school and all that sort of stuff. I'm not sure if the glass is bulletproof or not. Probably not. Why isn't every single department in America being put have to put one squad car with 2 or 1 officers, whatever you want to dedicate to that day, in front of every single school every single day? Why is that going to militarize our schools as the left is claiming that it will now? You know what I mean? And I understand resources are thin in many smaller departments as well. Well, guess what? If we can spend 100 and how many billion now for Ukraine, for that money laundering pit of hell for the Biden family, crime family, then we can spend 1 squad car and harden these targets at least a little bit for our children who, frankly, I feel terrible for Ukrainian children, but I feel worse for ours. So
the big thing as well with the Nashville shooting is the shooter literally had another original target and canceled that target and chose the target they attacked due to security.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Their plan originally was to go to some other Christian school or something, and they went to that one. So I mean, I feel like it literally gives you the answers like, oh, they shifted schools because this private school didn't have security. Like most public schools these days have school resource officers.
Yeah.
Even when I was going through school like 10 years ago now, however long it was, there were school resource officers in the school, right? There was like 1 sheriff's deputy or something in the school, right? But you go to private schools and a lot of them still don't have security. So it's changing, but I think, and law enforcement isn't necessarily the answer. It doesn't have to be a cop. It has to just be security, right?
Sure.
I think
but
because
I mean,
even in 1 cop is truly not enough.
I'm trying to make it easy, though. I'm trying to make it easy.
I know. I get what you're saying.
If you say you put law enforcement there, I mean, listen, we're a little bit beyond like what the normies think, obviously. So we have a more nuanced view on law enforcement, the 3 of us and people in our group. However, I think most people would feel very comfortable in the, for example, in New York City, they have school safety officers who drive in patrol cars that look exactly like squad cars, who who have uniforms.
Most schools around the country,
right? So why couldn't you have them armed, sitting in a squad car outside, as all police are armed, right, in our country? Why can't you just have them sitting out there?
Well, and that's what we tend to have, right?
Yeah.
But this is my criticism of that. One, right? Parkland had a school resource officer, right?
Yep. Coward.
Didn't do anything. And a lot of school resource officers.
That's different than a cop.
No,
that's different than a cop who's assigned.
They were
but whose mission, right? Like a squad car that's out there that's assigned to respond to this kind of thing.
No, that's what they were. That's what they were.
Really?
Parkland, it was a deputy with the
just cowards.
I forget what sheriff's office it was,
Cowards.
but some Seminole was it? No, Broward County Sheriff's Office deputy. And this is the thing. A lot of times, because if you think about it, right? You think of the average person who gets into law enforcement. Do they really want to be sitting in a school all day?
No.
Probably not. Right?
No.
That does not sound like a fun job.
They want to be stepping. They need to step or protect. it's one or the other.
But what I'm saying is, you don't feel like you're doing a whole lot, right? Because it's just like any security guard style position. You're like, okay, what am I doing here, right? And because they're also, a lot of times it tends to be older officers. If you notice, a lot of these older officers, it's a retirement gig.
Sure.
Right? And that's fine as long as they're still willing to do the job, which that Parkland officer wasn't. And I think Uvalde had a school resource officer that just also didn't do anything. Because, I think he was the one who originally saw the shooter and just, did nothing about it. If I remember correctly. I could be getting it wrong, but I believe that's what happened. But my point is, one person is not enough because, one, the school resource officer is someone everyone knows in the school. They have an office. A strategic attack, someone who has a little bit of intelligence could be like, I'm going to take out the school resource officer first, and then I'll go with everyone else.
Exactly.
Right. The one armed person. So I think you need to I think it is literal evil to prohibit teachers from carrying firearms if they want to.
Right.
We should not force them to, right?
Nope.
No one should be forced. But if someone wants to carry a firearm, like I think it was the gym teacher in Parkland or whatever normally would carry, and he didn't, obviously, because he's at school. He died saving kids, but he could have killed the shooter. Except some scumbag put a law in place saying, yeah, you can't carry a gun in school because reasons. Like,
well, yeah, and that's what irritates me is you'll have somebody who carries, right? It's like these people who are like, we can't have guns in schools, we can't have guns in churches, and it's like, okay, you realize that you're crossing these people on the street every day who are concealed carrying, who are legal, law-abiding citizens who don't hurt anybody. Why is it when they cross this imaginary boundary line of our most precious resources, our children, are they not allowed to carry? They carry, 24 hours a day on their day off, every single day, and have for 20 years. But the second they enter this property, all of a sudden we can't have that. I don't understand that thought process.
Well, I think it's very much from the FUD boomer perspective, right? Of, oh, well, you'll never need it here. You'll never need it there. I only need it when I go here. Like that sort of mentality, right? And it's this like crystal ball, like stupidity that I can't stand. But something I want to bring up talking when you said train people is this from Russia from years ago, the Belsen school siege.
Right. Yeah.
Beslan school siege. I can't talk today.
Didn't like Spetsnaz go in with like a RPK and like kill all the kids and all the terrorists or something crazy like that?
So
like,
there was the theater thing where they gassed everyone and killed a bunch of citizens.
Okay.
But this was there was like, I think, what was it? 1,000 people were killed. 1,000 people in a school shooting. Now this hasn't happened here, but think ISIS, not really Al Qaeda, whatever terrorist organization you want to go with. They set something up. It would not be. I'm surprised it hasn't happened, to be honest.
Well, this is what I mean. So
something like this could occur
because the targets are, frankly, I'm gonna say it, man. I can't take it anymore. I'm really fired up tonight. Sorry, because we got on to this topic. The left is evil. The left has skipped all morality, has skipped everything. What they're doing right now is saying that they don't want to militarize our schools. They're actually coming out and saying, why would we ever do that? Right? Why? And then you had actually Patches McCain gets on CNN recently, Dan Crenshaw for the uninitiated. And he actually was confronted by one of the idiots who worked there. Now, I'm not a Patches McCain fan, but in this instance, he did say something correctly. And she says, so how do we solve the problem? He's like, well, we need people there with guns who are good guys with guns. So we solve the problem with guns with more guns. Is that what you're saying? Yes. And then he gave a nuanced answer because she attacked him from that emotional position, right? Every one of us is upset. I'm sorry. The left is not, sorry, left, you're not more upset than we are. We are all equally upset every time one of these issues
they
happen.
act like they have the
moral high ground.
Not even the moral high ground, but like they've cornered the market on being mad about mass shootings, right? It's like, oh, we're mad. Conservatives are like happy about it or something,
right?
Just people who aren't on our side,
right? Because we're into the bad things. We're into the guns. Those are the bad things.
But guns are okay for Ukraine. Guns are okay for arming like cartels. That's okay,
right?
Right.
When the ATF does it,
Fast and Furious.
But I just like I want to clarify something, okay? Because I don't want to alienate people. It's not the left that is so much the problem when it comes to the anti-gun shit as it is the Democrat Party. Because when you go far enough left and you get to communist, those people are like, yeah, let's start blasting these fools too. Obviously, we disagree on so many other vehemently important things, but at the end of the day, there are so many people who are voting for Democrats who don't believe this anti-gun stuff. The proof is in the pudding. When was the last time you saw Beto O'Rourke? And that why didn't he win? I mean, you look at how far Texas has gone left. At the end of the day, there are so many people on the left that are pro-gun. Maybe they're not fully pro-2A, but they are pro-gun. They own guns and that kind of stuff. So I think that we need to say, hey, the Democrat Party is not in line with the majority of Americans. But there are people who are just like hardcore Democrats that just say, I want your AR-15. I want it gone. I want it out of here. And I don't care about the Second Amendment. It should be repealed.
Well, I think there's an issue of education, right? A lot of people just simply are unaware of reality, right? They don't. they kind of have the disassociative thing, and I've seen of people. They see
Right.
the school shooting, but they're like, I don't need to protect myself.
Yeah.
The answer is disarming others, and it's like it won't solve the problem. Like I said, the deadliest things are always things outside of the firearm realm.
Just I want to tack on. Sorry, my other computer that I've been working on all day started to bug out. I want to tack one thing on to what Brett said. You know, I love this one point that Dan Bongino always brings up. And, you know, he could be a little hackish sometimes, you know, like your conservative, like, you know, red meat kind of guy. However, I like the guy. I actually went to high school with him. Didn't know him personally. I saw him around the halls. He was scary.
Man, you're old.
Yeah, I'm old. He's a scary looking dude, actually, in high school. But the point is, he always says this one line. There are no Democrats who are Republicans, but there are many Republicans who are actually Democrats.
Yep.
And that's another part of the issue, Brett. Like when I say the left, I think it's more, I don't say it as a party. I say it as an ideology, right?
Yeah.
And there are plenty of FUDs and Dan Crenshaw, there are plenty of like, you know, lefty gun folks on our side with about 20 people in the Freedom Caucus who are actually, you know, purists and real gun lovers, and more importantly, Second Amendment lovers. So, you know, when you're talking about immediately going to the guns and stuff like that as an emotional response, that's typical because it's just part of their agenda. They know that if they harden the target, you'd see either less school shootings or they would move to other softer targets, because at this point, I feel personally, this is just my opinion here, that they've wound up, these shooters have wound up just going to the easiest target because they all want to die by police and make some sort of a political statement while they're doing it, right? So it's an act of terrorism, and coupled with, you know, suicide because they're depressed because, you know, they don't have a winky or they want to cut off their winky or whatever it is that they want to do, you know, in some cases, you know, and I'm being mean right now because frankly, the way our administration responded to this week was an abomination, an absolute abomination. As a concerned parent, I have concerns. I'm sitting here worrying about my children day in, day out. I drive by their school during the day and I freak out every single time I think of one of these school shootings. So I want to know what they're going to do. Don't tell me about taking guns away. You're not going to do it. It's just never going to happen. Never. Legally, you can take all the legal guns away and some idiot is going to walk right into a school again and do the exact same thing with their illegal gun. And we all know this to be a fact, right? So I want hard results and I want them now. And I don't want to hear some bullshit about trans rights when this was a targeted killing of Christians, right? Christians are the number one persecuted group in the world, according to the United Nations. Okay. So this is a targeted killing of Christians in America, right? What are you going to do about it? I don't want to hear about the trans rights because, you know, there's using that as an excuse to fuel more hatred in that community right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I want to piggyback off of that because, you know, part of me wants to say, well, you know, I'm just obviously devil's advocate, right? Like your mass shooting isn't special. But at the same time, think about how Pulse nightclub was politicized.
Yes.
Imagine if that shooter would have been a Christian and how much more that would have been. The reason it didn't blow up as much as it was,
some sort of like Christian anti-gay agenda.
Yeah, but instead, you know, obviously the dude was a Muslim. And because of that, it muddied the water and they focused more on this is an attack on gay people. When we don't really even have any evidence if that was the case. The guy just picked a target and, you know, it's like, okay, maybe he personally hated gays, but I don't think there was there was a political objective there. Whereas this one, we have a trans person shooting up Christians.
He was a Muslim who was anti.
Well, I mean, but I don't think that he shot up that gay club just because he wanted to kill as many gays as possible. I think that he was going to just murder a bunch of people regardless.
I think you could articulate one, but it was never said because that's another protected class, right? We haven't seen it as much lately, to be honest. Like I feel like, you know, like Islam, and I have nothing against Muslims or anything like that, but
Yeah.
Islam has fallen out of favor with the left as
Yep.
of late. It's not defended as much. Now
true.
it's Ukrainians. Now it's communists. Now it's people with mental disorders who need help, but instead are propagated as
it's obvious why,
the most virtuous.
Listen, you take the Muslim culture, which globally right now still has such a hardcore belief in the Quran, and a lot of that culture is anti-gay in a very
They throw them
hardcore
off
way.
roofs.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
As just one thing. So it's hard to align yourself with that. At first, it's easy because we're bombing them. We're at war with them for 20 years, so you can make them into a victim. Look how we bomb brown people, right? But now they have the perfect weaponized system because the trans community, the gay community, the LGBTQ plus tilde sign plus minus divided by X by Z ampersand community is both the sword and the shield. Think about this. You can use that community as the sword when you want to call someone a bigot, call someone anything, transphobic, you name it. You can use that community for that. But then also, if you're a corporation, right, you donate a little bit of money, your Chase Manhattan Bank, you put
hire an insane person on TikTok.
You put a huge
their face on a can of beer.
You could do the Bud Light thing. You can put a big float, a big rainbow float in a parade and put Chase Manhattan Bank on. Now you have the shield because if you attack me for all the corrupt, horrible things that I'm doing, hey, you're anti-gay. Look at this.
I want to get to my point before I forget it.
I'll go for it.
So when the Pulse nightclub shooting happened, what do we see? Pride flags everywhere, right? It immediately went up. We have to protect the gay community, all that kind of stuff. When this shooting happened and by the way, I am agnostic. So anybody who's watching this, like, just know that I don't even have any skin in the game. But so we have a Christian academy that was shot up by a trans person. And I think it's pretty clear that, obviously the mainstream message is that Christians hate trans people. Christians hate gay people. Christians hate anybody who is not on the binary spectrum. But we have this trans person who shot up a Christian academy, killed people, and we're not seeing support for the Christian community in the mainstream. If anything, it's this poor trans person was pushed to this point. That's the message that we're seeing in the mainstream. And that is so messed up to me. And to me, it exposes an agenda because Pulse nightclub gets shot up, pride flags everywhere. Christian academy gets shot up. This poor trans person was pushed to this point by Christians. How can we support the trans community? That's disgusting.
Well, and it's interesting, right? Because they weren't driven there by, they're driven there because of all the hate. They just had to do it. It's like, what? Like, that doesn't make sense. I think they were driven. I think that argument holds weight, but in a different direction. They were driven by a media, by a political party, by an entire generation who's been pushed to the idea that everyone hates you, that because you had some mental issues, that actually means that you're the wrong gender. So you should take all these hormones that destroy your body, that ruin you for life. You should chop off your reproductive organs, right? All these things. That's what drives people to do these things, right? And the thing is, if you guys remember the Colorado Springs shooting with like the Dark Knight thing, that guy was non-binary, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Denver shooter was trans. The Aberdeen shooter, they were like, this isn't a new thing. And what's interesting? And I was looking at the statistics today. Transgender people have a higher rate of committing crimes than the average person. Now, I'll explain.
Interesting.
One, they're like less than 1% of the population, right? So you talk about mass shootings, yeah, majority are white, actually majority, some are black, actually. That's a whole other conversation. But the majority tend to just be non-gender confused people. However, when you look at population representation, when you have less than 1% still committing a lot of crime, because what happens is when you cause these more hormonal imbalances in people, right, you're giving women testosterone, right? That's a huge thing. Testosterone, right? Toxic masculinity is something that's thrown around a lot, but there is a level of testosterone in the body is the reason men can be more aggressive than women, right? Inherently, it by design, right? When you give that to women who normally don't have that in their body, what's going to happen, right? It's like if you take a bunch of fentanyl all of a sudden, you've never taken drugs before, you're going to OD. So you're giving a hormone that is not designed for your gender into your brain that you, for 20 something years or whatever, you never even experienced testosterone, right? Us men, we've been dealing it for our entire lives, right? There is a balance where sometimes you get angry, sometimes things happen and you have to control yourself.
Oh yeah.
But women who then think they're men and are given these drugs by these sick doctors who are just trying to make a profit, what do you think is going to happen when you give these people chemicals that mess up their brain?
And you know what? I do want to slightly defend the trans community, partially playing devil's advocate here. There are so many mass shooters who have not been trans, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But I think that what we need to look at is what pharmaceuticals are every mass shooter taking. I want a breakdown of the pharmaceuticals that is in all these people's bodies. But the thing is, this stuff gets buried because Big Pharma owns everybody. That's not going to be advertised in the media or on the news or anything like that, because that is who sponsors the news and the media is going to be, Pfizer, these pharmaceutical companies. Number two, what is the parental situation of these mass shooters? How many of them did not have a father present? And number three, I think it's just going to boil down to this. When you're looking at specifically a school, single point of entry, and allow people with, that can legally conceal carry a firearm anywhere else, conceal carry a firearm in school, and advertise it. Not who they are, but have a big old sign that says staff here are armed, and we will defend our children, because that is the deterrent. Just having armed people in a school will not prevent somebody from killing people in that school. Someone can walk in and still get 3-6 of them before somebody stops them. But these people want to cause as much carnage as possible. If they go up and they see a sign and they're like, dude, I don't know who's carrying on this campus. They could shut me down before it starts. I'm going to go somewhere else. But if they go to every single school, if they know that every school has people concealed carrying, guess what they're going to start looking for? The place that doesn't have any guns. So those are kind of my 3 points.
And this is the thing, right? If you've ever been to the White House, anyone's ever been to the White House or any Capitol building, you will have, like, every hallway, there's a Secret Service agent, right? They're everywhere. That's what we need in our schools. That's what should be happening, right? Unless every teacher was carrying and trained, because just because you're carrying doesn't mean you're super effective with it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's hard. I don't want to put that responsibility on teachers, because like, your focus is teaching, right? Like that'd be a secondary or even tertiary thing. So there should be a significant, a ratio for every 50 students, there's one security guard, right?
Maybe.
Because that's the thing. You could have an SRO and armed teachers, but if, let's say, 5 mass shooters go in there, right?
Right.
And or even one individual with training with disguises, with, may not even use a gun, might use a knife, might like different means. Like, there's all sorts of different things that they could utilize, especially for the element of surprise. So I think you need to have security, just like you'd have at an event with a bunch of rich people, at the White House, at all these other politicians and elites that get all this security. Why are we not doing it for people who literally can't defend themselves, right?
It's not feasible.
A senator could still defend himself, right? Yeah. A senator can carry a gun and shoot. What is a 3-year-old going to do?
It's so expensive, though. That's why I'm all for allowing the volunteer, right?
Well, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I'm just saying, in reality, it's not enough.
Yeah, but the thing is that just them doing it is enough of a deterrent to stop it. The evidence is there with the recent Nashville shooting. It's like just having an aware, like, hey, there's security at the school. You don't know who's armed. It's like, if you're thinking, okay, I could go in there and clap 10 people before someone gets me, or someone could get me right away, they're always going to go to an easier target.
Yes.
Boys, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and offer up a hypothetical. You know what? I'm going to say something, because they don't, and they absolutely refuse to have any kind of, resource officers, a squad car, like I mentioned, parked outside, one point of entry, bulletproof glass, simple things, simple, low budget, simple stuff that they could do. You don't need I personally don't think you need a Secret Service officer on every floor or whatever, right? I agree with the sentiment.
I mean, that would be the most efficient, right? I think that's what he was saying. It's like, that's what it would take to just shut it down.
In reality, prevent it from being able to happen.
Here's my hypothetical, okay? They don't care, because this is working for them. They love it. They love the dead kids, and they love the dead kids because guess what? They get to use that to take away what they know is the last resource that we have left, because our First Amendment is clearly being eroded. Our Fourth Amendment's completely gone. There are a whole host of rights that you don't have anymore based on the NDAA and the Patriot Act. So guess what? You have this last thing, this last threat that the public has standing in their way. So they love the school shootings, because guess what? If we armed up those schools and did what Brett said and allowed people to carry, put up all the signs, had my cops sitting out front, plus you had 2 Secret Service style cops, in plain clothes with a concealed weapon. Let's just say 2 per floor in every part of the school. Wait, let me just finish the point. Sorry, brother. I just if they had that, guess what would happen? No one would hit the schools anymore. And then you wouldn't have the talking point that they do have now. And I feel so gross saying this, because like, how could someone do that? Right? Like that's what their defense is. How could you accuse me of that? No one wants to see kids die. You want to see them die because you have the guns. So that's their one defense. But also, guess what else would happen, boys and girls? Those shooters would go elsewhere. They would go to, maybe they'd go to college campuses. All right, move on from schools. They'd go to a supermarket like we had in Buffalo, New York, or they'd move somewhere where you
had a
are,
bank
out in the street, and make you less safe, wouldn't they? And believe me, if I could sit here on this podcast, right, on our little show here, and think this up, you don't think some Democrat in some think tank or some politician in some think tank hasn't thought of this themselves? It's one
Absolutely.
of those awful things that we're just going to have to let happen so that people can see how bad guns are in America.
The ends justify the means.
The ends justify the means. And I feel so I can't tell you how gross I feel saying this coming out of my mouth. It's just like, I can't even believe that I would go to this level of thought. But frankly, I think we're in such a diabolical time with such evil. And Brett, before you said you're agnostic, man, like I'm personally, like, I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic. The way I view the world, I just feel this sense of evil, so much evil around us. And that's why you're a concealed carrier. That's why Midas is a concealed carrier. That's why I am a concealed carrier. I feel such a horrible, overwhelming sense of evil right now that, I don't doubt for a second anymore. Like, I believe that everything is fake. I just believe everything they tell us is fake. So when they sit there and just, want to get on their high horse, their moral high horse about the kids, please don't, because they have no interest, in my humble opinion, in taking care of these kids.
Oh, I mean, I think it's two-pronged, right? You have some people who, like the higher ups, I think is what you're saying, right? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I mean,
because
like,
I think
people,
the
who
average person
who's
a Democrat and is like, oh, the mass shootings that's
different. I'm not talking about. I'm talking about someone who's who's a lawmaker, right? Who's sitting there. They're like, what's the benefit? What's the benefit to them, getting rid of these school shooters? Because they can point the finger at the Republican Party and the NRA, even though the NRA is on the left side, as we all know. If you're really woke, you understand that. But like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just the ultimate. And I know this is far-fetched, and I know people are going to get angry at me for saying this because it's so despicable. But you know what? If you don't want to do the base minimum of hardening the target, then and that's an option. People are saying to you, let's harden the target. No, God forbid we made it look militaristic. Oh, God forbid we made it look militaristic when children are being killed in America. Yeah, God forbid, right? I mean, I just, it would be normalizing guns. It would be normalizing gun culture if they did it. And that's another reason why they don't do it.
Yep.
That's another reason. And believe me, you guys, I may have put my tinfoil hat on. I'm looking for it. Hold on. I'm looking for my tinfoil hat. All right. It's somewhere in here. I'll find it later. But I'll tell you guys, I don't think it's in their best interest, is all I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely.
To stop the school shooting.
Well, it's never in a politician's interest to actually solve problems, right?
That's right.
It's hard to run on everything's fixed.
Great.
Right or left,
Exactly. Exactly. That's why the right gets power and yet doesn't fix everything, right?
Yep.
That's why they hated Trump, right? For all his faults and everything. Yeah. He actually tried to enact agendas that he said he was going to do.
In my home state of Arizona, just now that we have a Democrat governor in office, fairly or not, she's there. Our state legislature finally moved through a bill that would not allow the feds to enforce the NFA for suppressors in the state of Arizona because they knew it would get vetoed. That's we had a Republican governor for so long, and they didn't push that through. The second we have a Democrat, we're trying to fight for your gun rights. It's ridiculous. So that's exactly what you're saying.
It's all a game.
So
Our
gross.
rights are just a game to these people, and that's what you have to realize ultimately. And the reason I push so hard for a large security presence is I've seen schools, especially private schools, that do it, where they've recognized reality, and they're like, we're gonna. Like a
lot of the Jewish schools do that.
I'm currently not a parent, especially Jewish schools. I'm currently not a parent, but if I had children, right, or even whatever the situation is, if there was someone I'm responsible for, and I'm especially if I'm doing private school to begin with, I'll pay an extra $5,000 a year if it means that my kids are protected. Like there's armed security, and not just one dude who's like retired from like law enforcement. And may or may not be able to shoot, like all these things. Because the thing, right? We're not just looking at as conservatives or whatever it is we are. We're also looking at as gun guys. So we know the reality. Because a lot of times you have the conservatives who will say things, and it's from a good place, but it's like, oh, if we only had this or that. It's like that's not how it works, right? Tactically, it's not how this works. In reality, you need more than just one school resource officer, right? Because we've seen shootings where they've taken out security guards, where they've taken out security, right? Just right in the beginning, and then what are you going to do? Louisville, if the bank shooting, I don't know if there's a security guard of that. But
I mean, I've watched enough active self-protection to know that when there is an armed guard at the front, the robber never whoever is in there to be violent, they usually don't make it very far. So
yeah. And like I said, that's the thing. You need visible presence, right?
Exactly.
New York in the 90s, right? How did they quell crime? Now it's obviously on the rise. Tons of cops. They flooded the streets
Everywhere.
with cops. You saw cops. Am I going to put a crime in front of the cops? No. Right. Obviously this is fiction, but it does fit with human psyche in, a lot of the Batman movies, right? The bad guy sees the bat signal and they're like, all right, no, we're going home. We're not doing it. Like I think it was in The Dark Knight, where they see the bat signal and like, oh, I'm not doing the drug deal tonight. We're canceling. Right. Because it's a deterrent. That's all we can do. Ultimately, if 40 people decide to go to a school like in Russia and commit a mass shooting, what are you going to do? Right.
Yeah. And I realize that we're in an echo chamber here, but I just want, and it's like, obviously anybody watching this is probably pretty much in agreement with us. I just want to clarify this for the one person that might have snuck through here wondering why aren't we addressing the guns, how guns can be more safe, how we can restrict crazy people from having guns. And it literally boils down to this. Are you okay with someone walking into a school with a kitchen knife and stabbing one child in the neck with it? If the answer is no, you're not okay with that, then no amount of controlling anything will ever stop something like this from happening. We have 400 million guns in this country. We have a Second Amendment that is protected. Repeal it if you don't like it. We need to take personal responsibility for our safety and the safety of our children and our citizens. That's something that has been lost. We lean too heavily on big daddy government. We need to take personal responsibility, arm ourselves. If you do not carry one of these, you in this country are choosing to declaw yourself. We as human beings are designed to use tools to defend ourselves and to feed ourselves. And just because we live in this facade of civilization, that doesn't mean that we're not still animals that need to protect ourselves.
So way to shit on all the pores, Brett. I don't have a staccato.
Yeah. No, I just do that so people know that I actually carry this every day. I'm like, see, look, it's on me.
I just flex on them with my Glock because, as you know, I'm a Glock shill. So,
yes.
Yeah.
I have a $2,000 Glock too. So
nice. Well,
no, go ahead, Pete.
I will tell you, boys. Like I couldn't agree more with everything you just said. Obviously, because we are not pro gun on this show. As everyone knows, we are a pro 2A show. That's more important. And yes, you're declawing and defanging yourself. I want to tell you guys a quick story. So during Hurricane Sandy, as everyone knows, I'm in New York. I'm in behind enemy lines over here. Things are getting better for us because we are fighting, though. I will tell you that. And there is a strong, amazing gun community here, which I'm getting deeper and deeper involved with. But during Hurricane Sandy, my wife and I were living with our newborns temporarily while we were buying a new house in an apartment in the city in Manhattan. And we were on 40th Street at the time. And from 39th Street down, there was absolutely no power. So like the zombies were coming up from 39th Street just to plug their phones in to charge. Some of the nicer neighborhoods in Manhattan have these like trees that they wrap with like Christmas lights all year round, so it looks pretty. And they have like electrical sockets at the bottom, so they would just unplug the trees and then like plug in their phones and charge for a while, right? Because no one had power from 39th Street all the way down to the southern tip of Manhattan, right? And so it was kind of a weird time because 2 days with no deliveries, the entire city has no food supply. I'm getting to my point. Hang in there. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go out and buy some more formula for my sons, and kind of stash that away just in case shit gets grimy. Also, I'm going to buy some candles if we do lose power, because we just didn't have any in the house. It was a temporary place we were staying at. Anyway, I get the formula. I'm at a CVS, and lo and behold, I see the candle shelf. Of course, there's nothing but one stupid like Christmas candle left over from God knows when, right? And I'm like, well, that's the only one they got. That's the one that I need. And I go to reach for it, and a little hand jumps in front of my hand as I almost catch it and snatches it away. And it's a little girl, and she goes and turns around to her father and goes, "Daddy, Daddy, look, I got the last one." Right. And the father looked at me, and I kind of looked back at the dad, and I was like, all right, well, don't worry about it. Take it. It's all good. I got it. I'll be fine. Because I had power and I'd be fine. But that is how thin the veneer is on our society. Okay. That's why when you said that, the thin veneer of civilization. And let me just tell you, you're seeing that thin veneer break down all around the world right now. In this moment, look at France, look anywhere where there is some civil unrest. They tried to change the retirement age in France. They don't care that their rights have been stolen away from them completely as a nation, but their retirement age, they care about. These lazy French fucks. So now they're burning down the country. Okay. And you know what? We're just as lazy here as Americans. Don't worry, French. You could beat on us all day long because we are just equally as lazy. And you're right, Brett. Thin veneer on society that all breaks down. And if you don't have that, see what you had just pulled out in your hand there. If you don't have that, you won't be able to defend yourself, and you won't be able to get things if shit goes really sideways. So wake up, people. Really, wake up.
Well, I think the big thing with all of this is, a lot of times, and I think, not to call you out or anything, Pete, but we go down these rabbit holes.
Go ahead,
a
brother.
little bit.
Call me out.
Of like, okay, end of the world. We need to get our, and I think people should be able to have their own food supply and all this stuff. Like that's something to think about, right? What if the supply chains, like COVID, right? You go to the store, there'd literally be no food, right? It happened. But we tend to go to these big scale issues because it's this hypothetical and it's easier to talk about, right? And I think there is an issue with stuff. And I think we're talking about security, and I'm not against it whatsoever. Obviously, I was a big proponent for it, this entire conversation. But, I forget if I think it was you, Brett, who was talking about the medications they're on.
Right, yeah.
The SSRIs, all this stuff. Like our society as a whole is crumbling. That is the core issue, right?
Yeah.
Fatherless homes, tons of medications, social media. These sorts of things are the true causes of these mass shootings are a symptom.
Yep.
Right.
Sure.
It's not the problem is not the mass shootings. The mass shootings are a symptom of the problem. The problem is the collapse of society, the collapse of the family, the collapse of values, right? We all share, we at least all share something, right? You can run into someone in the street these days and you might share nothing with them.
Yeah.
Almost nothing. Almost no value shared, right? But that isn't the case all the time, right? At the same time, I'll run into people all the time that pretty much agree on the basic things. We might disagree on how we go about doing it, but we agree that life is sacred. We agree that people have freedoms, all these things. But when you're online, this chronically online society, everyone disagrees with you. Everyone's out to get you. Everyone's the enemy, right? And think you create this culture. And when like the I'm not going to say his name, but the shooter of the Louisville bank, apparently he was about to be fired, and so it was like a retaliation thing. And that's the solution people go to. Now, I don't know if he was on SSRIs or whatever. I wouldn't be surprised, right? Most of these shooters are on something, right? Either they're a trans shooter and they're on a bunch of hormones, or they're just an average person who, instead of fixing their diet, fixing, their hormonal imbalances and stuff, they just instead are given a bunch of medications that we don't really know what they do to people because we've only had them for like a couple decades now. Some of them just released on the market, this new Myplexin or whatever. Consult your doctor about Myplexin.
The doctor's getting kickbacks on every Myplexin he sells.
They do get extra money for that. They get things for promoting it. They get extra sample, all this sort of stuff.
Yep.
Then they can sell the newest drugs. They can prescribe the newest drugs. They get that thing, or their market, or the local pharmacy. Like, there's all sorts of stuff going on with that. And of course, side effects may include death, vomiting, nuclear diarrhea. Like, it's like all these crazy things.
Mass shooting,
right? They're starting to add that to it probably. But we're not, and that's what's not really being addressed. I feel like it's talked about for a little bit. Every so often you see someone mention it, but it goes away. I think, as awful as it was, I think the only bright light shining out of it for the Nashville shooting is you can't ignore it's a mental health issue now. Right?
Well, they're trying to.
Yes, the left, the trans community is like, oh my God, you're attacking the trans community. But I think more and more people are being like, hey, this person had some issues and they did this. Like, maybe there's a correlation there. Maybe it's not just, and you'd think any logical person would be like, I wonder why someone wants to commit a mass shooting. Could it be that they're a perfectly sane, logical individual, or that they have mental problems? No, they're a perfectly sane, logical individual. The problem is they could buy firearms, right? And what about our society has reached the point where the issue, you could argue perhaps that the issue is the access to firearms, right? And that people are so fucked up in the head now that they'll go buy a gun and do something like this. Now, the answer is not getting rid of the guns, because they'll still get a firearm, they'll still get a bomb, they'll still get a knife.
Do anything.
You can't restrict people from being evil. You can't, right? You have to instead create a society that promotes people to be good. And that's the core of the issue. Society promotes evil at this point.
Well, you have to create a society first, Midas. Like, I think what's happened is a very purposeful deconstruction of our society. And it's evident because, for example, if you take from the 70s and 80s, the Democrats and Republicans, right? I remember a time in this country where you would have arguments like, it was the standard argument. You spend too much. Okay, you spend too little. And then, but hey, at the end of the day, we're all Americans here. But now I feel there's a very, very wide gap and divide between us as Americans. So you have to have, what does Michael Savage say? Language borders culture in order to have a nation. You know what I mean? And we don't share, a lot of these things anymore. I mean, culture is broken completely. Like you said before, medication, fatherless homes, many fatherless homes. Also, the lack of faith and dependability on the male, just in general. That's a big issue. The idea that somehow masculinity, real masculinity, is toxic. Of course it isn't. Real true masculinity is necessary. And as is true femininity, and the two combined make what a beautiful society, a family unit, right? A culture that's being broken down. The family unit, the highest divorce rates in history, or no marriage at all, right? So as you've seen all these societal breakdowns, we have nothing to unify us anymore, not even America, where you would go to a sports game, you'd stand for that flag. And listen, granted, I believe in your rights to sit down or kneel. But when that happened, it crossed a line that changed us, maybe irrevocably. Maybe it's just a fad in our culture right now, but maybe irrevocably, because when you went to a sporting event, if you did, I was never a sports guy, but if you did, you felt that sense of unity. You felt that sense of togetherness. Hey, you know what? We all put our bullshit aside to watch the guys play sport ball for an hour or two, and we drink our Bud Lights, and we would go home afterwards and have like hang out with the wife and kids or whatever, right? That is very common to us all, and all of this has now been weaponized against us as a society, and I think that has shown to actually be what's putting cracks in the dam, so to speak. And I think it's not just like pouring, like it's not just like leaking here and leaking there. It's actually the water's starting to rush out. And I feel like the dam's about to break on us. I really do. I don't know. Maybe it's just my own level of anxiety about these things. Maybe I overthink them, but I do feel like we're at a tipping point now. And if we don't turn this back, and I'm not saying like Donald Trump is the answer to your problems, right? But for sure, continuing down this path isn't either. So,
well, I think when it comes to brain fart. When it comes to the not standing for the flag thing, I think that's a symptom as well. I think, and I think it depends as well, right? Obviously, I'm younger. I'm looking more of a historical perspective. You might looking for more of a perspective of experience. And looking back in history, for me, if I look back to, let's say, like, honestly, I think our society started falling apart around Woodrow Wilson. That was the beginning. That was the beginning of the end.
Old Woodrow, right? That was it for you? That's what did it for you?
Well, he was one of the first one of the big government presidents, right? Part of that same establishment, the New World Order sort of thing, right? Creating these giant intercontinental agreements,
sure,
with other countries, of creating like a larger nation, world state, or whatever. But I think from there, you look at like LBJ and the welfare state that they created. Like it's been happening, right? You have the infiltration by communism into the United States with people like Yuri Bezmenov basically telling us exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
Predicting the future. So this is not a recent phenomenon. This is just we're recently seeing the results of like 100 years of infiltration, right? Of communists, socialists, big government, crony capitalists, whatever you want to call them. We're seeing that infiltration for the past hundreds. I mean, it's always been existing forever in history.
And new infiltration, Chinese Communist Party infiltration.
Yeah, it's a continuing cycle. But
for
the Soviet Union did it. China's doing it, right? There was like police substations for Chinese police in the United States where they were tracking Chinese citizens in the U.S. Like all these sorts of things. Most people don't know about this.
No,
right?
And the internet and social media was like a megaphone for this stuff. It allowed them to amplify the spread.
Algorithms and stuff where, you're just being force-fed the worst things possible. So you think all the cops are racist. You think everyone's out to kill you. You think guns are evil. You're just being force-fed stuff. And if my feed is all of that, and I don't have the ability to think enough for myself because of the way I've been raised, the way society has raised me, I'm screwed.
Well, these are conspiracy theories that are being sold on a mass scale. Like the 1619 Project, for example, saying that America is founded on racism is a complete conspiracy theory. It's part of the I don't know if you guys are familiar with in New York, we have like the Black Hebrew Israelites, the 5%ers, right? And they're these guys. And back in the old days, they used to dress up in these wild outfits, right? And these outfits were so wild and crazy and stuff. And they would yell at you and they would scream at you and they would quote the Bible and do all this weird stuff. And these are conspiracy theorists. These are people that believe in conspiracies that America was founded on slavery. America was has always been racist. America was this. America was that. There's all kinds of conspiracy theories about the founders, about everything. And now this stuff has been normalized. When I was I still do listen to hip hop, but like back when I was a kid, the more quote unquote conscious rap, it had all these conspiracy theories in it. Like I just heard actually this is not conscious rap, but I had heard Big Pun in an old rap song say the First Amendment is culturally biased. That's one of his lyrics. And it's this kind of bullshit that has been sold into the culture writ large now. So that you have Nicole Hannah-Jones, who started the 1690. I mean, I'm harping on this particularly because it's a great example. At the New York Times, she's a Pulitzer Prize award winner.
Award-winning,
right? And she's a Pulitzer Prize winner of a conspiracy theory, and this stuff is being normalized. And then if I say, along with you guys on this show, the stuff that you were just talking about, Midas, then all of a sudden we are labeled extremists and conspiracy theorists. Which, by the way, the FBI says that if you say based, Chad, or red pilled, you are an extremist now.
Yep.
I mean, this is the level that it's gotten to, and I agree with you. All those seeds were planted, Midas, prior with like the Woodrow Wilsons and the LBJs, the welfare, all that stuff. But I feel the rhythm in the last 40 years, since 1980 on, has excelled because, and exponentially because of how so many of our politicians, not just Biden, have sold out to the Chinese Communist Party, literally via lobbyists in this country.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like a multifold thing, right? You have the people at the top of the top of the top who want to destroy our society, and there's different reasons that people say, oh, it's they want the new world order, or it's this. I think people are a lot simpler than people. People give the vanguards, the State Streets, the Black Rocks more credit than they deserve. I think it is all about the power and the money. That's all it's ever been about. And, I think what you have really is it starts people like Wilson who just want control, who are actual racists, who are actual insane people who want control over everyone's life. Then as you continue, same with it's all about control and getting people to vote for you. And literally LBJ, there's that line that he may or may not have said, we'll get these N-words voting for us for the next 100 years.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Supposedly he didn't say
Awful.
it, but
I thought it was on tape.
I don't know. But point aside, no matter either way, that's essentially the mentality. That's the reason they created the welfare state. That's the reason they made the government the father and they got rid of the fathers in the homes. Yeah. Because that's how you get control. When you need the government to live your life, you're not going to vote against the government.
And open borders.
Right? Open borders. So you're having tons of immigrants coming in, raising the population and the electoral college votes for certain states like California.
And not to mention people that are dependent on the government because they're coming in poor.
They're coming in for government assistance.
Yeah.
They're coming in. Some might be dying coming in. Maybe the husband dies, the mother dies coming into the country because the coyotes are smuggling them inside of box trucks in the hot sun. I mean, it's all these horrible humanitarian. I can't say the word. Humanitarian. There you go. Thank you. Issues, humanitarian crisis is apparently having a stroke tonight.
Please don't.
But it's all of these things that combine together that ultimately just gives these same individuals more and more power, right? And it's hard to say, is there a great conspiracy to ruin everyone, destroy everyone, put estrogen in the water and all this stuff? Who knows, right? What can we prove? We can prove right now that there is a administration in the White House that does not provide a single actual solution for literally hundreds of problems currently in this country when obvious solutions exist for most of these, right? That's the thing. When there's an obvious solution that, like, let's say the prior administration was trying to implement, and then you literally go undo it, and then you're allowing the problem to continue to fester, you have no ground to stand on. You're done.
You're standing on a chocolate chip ice cream cone, buddy.
Yes, and it's melting very fast. And and they have nothing, but their base will support them to no end. And you have these people, and I know
because it's about power and hierarchy.
Yes, but when you go lower, it's a cult. It is a cult. It is the cult.
Absolutely.
Just like we were talking, I was DMing with you guys, a little bit ago about like the whole SIG cult thing. I know we keep on going back to that, but these people who will defend the companies they love no matter what, it's the exact same thing. They will defend their party no matter what happens, right?
Right.
And it's on all sides. There's people I know who I have disagreements with because they like Trump and they're like, no, Trump's great. He's never done anything wrong. Like, no, Trump's done things wrong. You can't.
Of course.
It's factually wrong, right?
Take the guns first and then ask questions later.
The bump stock ban.
Bump stocks.
Suppressors.
Criminal justice reform. Like, there's all sorts of things that I was not a fan of with Donald Trump. Still, I think one of the better presidents I've ever seen.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean he didn't do bad things. And there are people, I know them, I've talked with them, I've disagreed with them, who are like, nope, Trump's perfect. If you say anything bad about him, you're anti-American.
You also can't forget the vaccine. Right. That was the other thing.
Of course. Thing, right? Yeah.
I don't think
Operation Warp Speed, boys.
Right. Yeah. And I think it came from a good place, and now Trump won't let it go because of his ego.
Yeah.
Right. But it's that same cult mentality, and I think we see it everywhere. And I think that's the reason why this human piece of garbage who, was rightfully taken out by the Nashville Metro Police or whatever, yet people are defending them. They'll refuse to condemn them.
Yeah.
I probably should have had the video up. I'm not going to go searching for it now, but there's literally a video where people will not condemn the mass shooter of Nashville. Like, oh, well, we don't understand her motive. Who cares what her motivations are? She did an objectively evil act.
Like you said, it's cult behavior.
It's cult-like thinking. It's cult-like behavior.
And it's convenient for them that it happened to Christians. And,
yes,
I know that, like, again, Brett, I'm not like calling you out. Like, if you're agnostic, that's cool, dude. Like I was agnostic as well at one point.
You won't offend me at all.
Yeah. It's not meant that way. I actually, whoever believes or doesn't believe, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't affect my faith one way or the other. But what I'm saying is, taking the idea of agnosticism or religion out of it, this is a group that's being targeted. Why isn't there somebody saying something? Because again, it's not red meat to
they're not a protected class
to their, and it's not red meat to their base. And also, frankly, I do go to a based red-pilled Chad church, and
right, we're all on the list now. Thanks, Pete.
You're welcome. And when I do go to church on certain Sundays, I have one priest we have is a Nigerian priest, and he's seen some stuff, right? It's not easy to be a Catholic in certain African nations. And the dude was like, literally calling out perversion by name. And they don't like that. The head of the entire, not that guy, but the head of our congregation, our the main, like, Monsignor or whatever, the main priest, he was like saying the other day, like, he said it in a veiled way, but he goes, they tried to silence us with under Nazi flags. They tried to silence us under communist flags. And, now there are other flags that are trying to silence us as well. So yeah, of course they're not going to kind of say anything about a Christian school, even though 3 beautiful children and also apparently a heroic teacher, or 3 heroic adults, one of them heroic, rather, I would say, for her actions, were killed, murdered. Think about this. This one little girl went out to pull the fire alarm. I forgot her last name, but she ran out to pull the fire alarm, and she got gunned down by this subhuman piece of shit, Audrey Hale, whatever her name was. And guess what, dude? Like, that kid's mom and dad, can you imagine, like, waking up the next day without your baby there? You're done. You're arranging funeral arrangement. No parent should have to bury their kid. And now we live in a country where, because of convenience, political convenience, okay, not for the right, but for the left, we could stop this today, but they refuse to. Like I said before, I'm convinced of it.
And it's not just political convenience, it's financial convenience, because we know, and it's like, I'm sure you could find the article, because there was a group of psychologists that got together talking about the copycat thing with these mass killing events, where one happens and then it sets off a chain reaction of a bunch. You have that guy in Louisville who's probably been sitting there hating his job, hating his life. He's like, man, I'd love to shoot this place up one day. And then it happened. He's like, oh, that's right, I was going to shoot this place up. Man, that made the news. That's awesome. I think I'm going to do that. And it just sets off this copycat chain reaction of them happening. Just the way they sensationalize this for views, because and then they hide the pharmaceuticals that they're on, because the pharmaceutical companies are paying for ads on the news channels,
sponsoring CNN and everything.
That's right. And so
for Big Pharma.
So instead of, investigating, and being an investigative journalist and seeing, like, okay, what drugs are these people on? What does their family look like?
What's the commonality?
Yeah, exactly. Instead, they're scapegoat the gun. In Nice, France, nobody tried to make it, more difficult for somebody to rent a truck when they ran over 80 people. Midas, you were talking about how, like, using other stuff is actually deadlier than a person coming in with a rifle. You're 100% right. Driving a truck through a crowd will kill more people than, that truck, the people with the truck.
Like a moving truck.
Yeah, and I hate to say beat, because it sounds like a high score, which is a part of the problem with the way the media portrays this. It's the number dead. What's your score? How many did you kill? How bad is it? Can the next person beat you? Then the Vegas shooter, the Vegas guy, literally raining hell upon a concert. Yeah, which is like the only mass shooting that's ever happened in this country where an armed person could not have made a difference. Instead, that was
carried like a PRS rifle in their truck
Yeah,
or something.
Well, look at what happened. Look what happened right here in New York City. The reason I installed a dash cam on my truck is because we had a guy take a U-Haul from or actually not a U-Haul, a Home Depot vehicle and run down a bunch of people.
Or it was with the Christmas parade thing that happened.
That too.
Like 2 years ago now.
Yeah, Waukesha. Yeah. Right, Waukesha, exactly. Horrific.
Like, and that guy was like defended by the media because he was black, so he was a protected class, right? And it's this tribalistic, race-based mentality and stuff that we have in our country, and it's far worse in the US than even other countries. You talk to Europeans, they're like, what is this? Like, what is this trans stuff? What is this race stuff?
Well, I don't know, Midas, you really don't understand because you're Mexican, so
that's true.
But you don't understand the plights of the white.
Yeah, that's so true. Look at his tan. You can always tell.
But the big thing, I think, at the end of the day, is just the collapse of society has led to people doing this because they feel purposeless, they are aimless, and they're like, what am I going to do? I'm about to get fired from my job. Let me just shoot it up. At least I'll be remembered.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Celebrity overnight
in the history books for being a piece of human garbage, and the media are going to love him because now he's pushing their narrative.
Yep.
Right. And I hate to demonize people like that. I try not to, but I can't. These are situations where I can't come to any other conclusion, right? Like Pete was saying, there's no other conclusion I can come to when you have obvious solutions to these things. Like tomorrow, you should be pushing, CNN should be pushing, all right, special sessions in every fucking state being like, yep, we're allowing teachers to carry firearms.
Yep.
Right. Be the easiest thing. No money has to be spent at all. $0 spent. Just let people who would carry a gun into a school carry a gun into a school.
I mean, yes, but I will tell you, I'd be happy with that. I would be not satisfied with that.
I would not be satisfied. I honestly, I think places like this, and maybe people are going to get on me for this, but when you have a place where you have the majority of the population there, like a school, these children can't protect themselves, right? And I think I've heard people talking about, okay, what about high schoolers, right? Should high schoolers be able to carry? That's a whole other conversation. Campus carry, yes, right? You're looking at adults.
Well, they used to be able to carry. Everyone had a 22. Well, everyone, and no mass shootings,
rifles,
no mass shootings
stuff. But talking about especially like elementary schools and stuff, which is where we see a lot of these things, right?
Yeah,
they're not going to have firearms because like there's a certain age where it's like, okay, more than likely you don't have this knowledge, you don't have the experience, you don't have the training, you don't have the ability to use it, right? Based on your size, right? What is a 3-year-old going to do, right? With a handgun, if you give them a Glock, doesn't mean they're going to be able to save their life. So I think there's an argument to have metal detectors, to have security being like, well, no, we're wanting everyone, if you want to come into school, you can't have a gun on you, right? Maybe they allow teachers then still, like staff, but I would be totally fine. I would have no problem, not mandated by the government, but a private school that was like, no, we don't let even parents to come into firearms. I wouldn't, part of me doesn't like it, but at the same time, if they're actually ensuring it and there's armed security enforcing it,
right.
And like, this is my other thing when you have gun-free zones. My issue is not wholly with a gun-free zone. If a business wants to say no firearms in our business, that's your private property. That's fine. If I want to be a patron of your business, right? Like most theme parks have security. They don't if you have a firearm, they're probably not going to let you in.
Yeah.
Right. But they have some level to enforce it. Right. But when you have places like schools who cannot enforce it, other than if you're a law-abiding citizen, you get discovered and you'll either get kicked out, your kid will get kicked out, you'll go to jail, right? Is the consequences you'll face, but there's no one actually enforcing it, so the mass shooter can still get in.
Yeah.
So,
and obviously we know this, but just for anybody who's like, thinks metal detectors are a solution, we all know this because we're thinking people. When you have a choke point that's a metal detector that usually holds people up and you create a line, that creates a target for a mass shooter because they don't. Like they have an AR-15. What the fuck is a metal detector going to do? You know what I mean?
You just walk up to the line. You still need armed security there ready to
exactly. But the thing, because it's like I saw that in Tucson when Gabby Giffords was domed. It's like that dude had a line, and it's like what I'm just relieved, and I don't even want to say. I mean, granted, hopefully nobody's watching this that wants to do any ill intent, but man, lines are targets, and I'm just relieved that nobody has figured that out since that guy. Like no one's like, hey, yeah, lines are a good idea. Because wow, that is like the most target-rich environment you could find. You just make the problem worse.
and I'm not, like I said, I'm not advocating personally. I'd rather just be in charge of my own protection. But I think there is an argument for places where the majority of the population can't carry, like not legally, but just like literally cannot carry.
Courtrooms is a good idea. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on in there. And by the way, I've been to the White House on business, and also because my wife was invited there for some work she had done for the First Lady. So we were there, and you know, it was. I felt as safe as a kitten. I was like, all right, I don't have my gun on me. I feel safe as a kitten. I mean, the chances of anything happening to me there was, you know, next to none.
Yes, but also if something started happening, they wouldn't care what happens to you. They wouldn't.
Yep.
It's
no,
all
they
about,
wouldn't. Of course, they wouldn't care what happened to me.
This is why I'm like, you know what? I think,
but there are plenty of guns around, boys.
Yes,
you know what I'm saying.
At the same time, I think you should be able to carry a gun to the White House. Fuck, the president can protect himself. He's a grown adult. He can carry a fucking. I mean, maybe not Joe Biden, but an actual live president can carry a gun and protect himself, right? You know, like the Congresswoman, was it Lauren Boebert who carried a gun to Congress and created a whole fucking.
Oh, she walked around the metal detector, and so did a few other people, because they installed after J6. They installed metal detectors, and they just all like hop the little gate and go around the metal detector, and it's like, what are you going to do? I'm a congressperson.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
You mean, wait a minute? You mean the was that the worst insurrection in the history of the country, or was it the recent insurrections in Tennessee? And where was the other one? Is it Kentucky?
Or the one or the one in 2020?
That's what I was going to say.
Well, I mean, the $2 billion of property damage.
Where they burned things down. Cops were injured. They burned down a church.
You mean and then Secret Service agents being injured as the mob tried to rush the White House? You mean that insurrection?
And then they made fun of the president for hiding in a bunker. They made fun of him for that.
Scumbags. But these people are the lowest of the low, communist scumbags.
Yeah, there's no logic to it. There's nothing. It's their logic. It's their belief. That's what it is. Ultimately, we're running a little long here, but I think, you know, let's do our thing. Let's all leave with something. So, Pete, what is your solution? If you could give one solution, one thing that tomorrow you could make it law just to stop these. You're the king of the universe for a day. What would you do to stop these mass shootings?
School shootings or just mass shootings, generally speaking? In America, in the world. All right, I'll just
America. You're the king of America for a day. How would you stop mass shootings?
So first and foremost, like I said, harden the target, and then after you harden the target, meaning like we said, let's just say all the solutions each of us presented tonight, right? From security on each floor to White House level security to a patrol car outside, like I said, right? Which would be the baseline level shit, single point of entry, bulletproof, all this sort of business, right? Yeah, okay, cool. Then harden Americans. Okay. These bullshit laws preventing people from carrying guns in most places where you should be able to carry a gun, they need to go. And people need to be able to be their own best security detail. We should be able to have training available. We should be able to have it be affordable. Right. So if I'm king for a day, you should have affordable training everywhere, some base level training for the average FUD, or some high speed motherfuckers like the dudes that you saw in Nashville. Everyone should be able to get training according to their needs. And harden the target, harden Americans. OK. And then believe me. Oh, and then also really inject some value back into the culture. I don't think we go full Maoist and give people a book to read from and everyone's got to be on the same page, because that's just un-American. But man, start raising your kids right. Start sticking with the woman that you got pregnant, buddy. I know that sounds so old, but like for real, start raising your kids. Start taking responsibility for yourself. That's what I recommend.
And Brett, what is your king for a day in the United States? How do you fix this?
Well, I will answer the king for a day thing by saying national concealed carry, constitutional carry nationwide.
Yes.
That's what I would say, with a tax incentive for those who carry. Nice. And the thing is, it's like, how can you tell if somebody carries? That's why I'm going to step down from king for a day and say, here is my compromise, a step in the right direction. a national concealed carry permit with the strictest background checks, the strictest shooting standards that you have to meet, and it allows you to carry anywhere a law enforcement officer could carry. And there is a tax incentive for receiving that national concealed carry permit. That is my compromise step in the right direction, because that seems incredibly reasonable to me, and I feel like the vast majority of people could actually get behind that.
Yeah, if I was king for a day, I would go back to, essentially try and roll back the culture to like before the 60s. Everything the 60s did, and undo it. The sexual revolution, the culture, all of it, just burn it all down.
Oh, I love that.
And go back, get rid of this fucking drug hippie sex woke culture, throw it in the dumpster fire it is, and just
there goes all of our best music though.
and get rid of it.
Don't worry, it's just MK Ultra programming, Brett.
I know, but it feels good.
So it's just that is the stem of it. You got to get rid of all of it, all the communist propaganda garbage that's been flooding our schools, our institutions. Just burn it all down, right? That's the main base solution. And then, legislatively, right, kind of like Brett, you were saying, I would make a law that it is illegal to have if you have a gun-free zone, you are responsible for every single person there. So if there's a mass shooting, you're responsible. They could sue you for $40 million or something ridiculous, right? Mm-hmm. And you're responsible. So if there's anything happens on your property and you do not allow someone to carry a firearm, whether they're carrying or not, if you don't allow them to, then you're responsible for them wholly. And then there's about like $100 million per person. Every person who's killed by that, there's a max payout of $100 million or something owed to the family, right? That's the way you do it. And then no business will ever have a gun-free zone again. Or if they do, they will have like armed security, actual security. That is the blanket solution that doesn't solve the culture problem, but solves this. Is if you want to have a gun-free zone, fine. If something happens, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Right? 10 people are killed, $1 billion is owed. Right? That will honestly end it, because greed, you incentivize, like you said, a tax incentive. You make a financial incentive for these companies to do something about this. It won't happen in a bank. It won't happen anywhere. True. Any private institution, you're good. And then obviously that even applies to the government stuff. The government can't have gun-free zones.
I just want to interject one quick thing, because I know we're getting off, but one quick thing. Look at the three of us schmucks on here, right? We just came up with amazing solutions, right? And you mean to tell me, no, I just don't believe it, that they can't figure this out in Congress and the Senate.
Oh, they can't. Okay? They don't want to.
They don't want to. As I said before, I more and more I'm starting to believe my own despicable conspiracy theory.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Pete, where can people find you, subscribe to you, all that good stuff?
Yeah, find me at TFN15 on YouTube and TFN.15 on Instagram. And, you'll see all my links there. All good stuff.
And Brett?
Nightwood Guns on YouTube, Nightwood Guns on Instagram. Don't get caught lacking.
All right. And
you have a freaking, man, I got to get 10,000 subs again. Because then I have a tagline like that. That's awesome.
And obviously, you're on my channel, so you can find it pretty easily. But if not, go to controlthegun.org. You can find all my links. Guys, if you have your own thoughts, your own solutions to mass shootings, school shootings, everything that's going on, leave it in the comments down below. Love to see it. Love to hear it. And any topics you'd like to see us discuss in the next episode. I know these don't get a whole lot of views, but I do normally get a couple comments, some engagement here. So if you want us to talk about something, we'll gladly talk about it. Also, if you want to be on the program, if you want to talk and join the conversation, I'm always open to having guests. You don't have to be some special YouTuber to be on the program. I'm really just down to have people to add to the conversation. So if you have something to add, or if you disagree with us and you're like some anti-gunner leftist, like, you're part of like Socialist Rifle Association or whatever, feel free to hop on. Feel free to come in the comments. We'll get in contact with you. We'll get you on the podcast, because, having those discussions, while we may disagree with you, I think is still a productive thing to do. So, guys, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll see you next time.